Dear scholars, Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon, welcome in the class. In the previous sessions, we have discussed what policy change, what change took place in the American policy towards the Middle East after 9/11, and what measures were taken, what initiatives were launched, what efforts were made to promote democratic norms and values and institutions in the Arab Gulf states by the United States. Today we will discuss how did the governments in these Arab Gulf countries respond to the efforts and demands made by the United States in this regard after 9/11. So this is chapter 6 of my PhD dissertation, response of the governments in the Arab Gulf states. Many political scientists believe that democracy only succeeds when local social forces support it. So only if there is only foreign assistance or foreign demands, it's not enough. Local forces should also support democracy. Local leaders, local organizations, local activists. This means democracy grows only when it fits well with the society that accepts it. Democracy becomes stronger when many pressure groups, social classes, and interest groups work within democratic rules. So, pressure groups are required, which put pressure on the government. Interest groups are required, which promote democracy, democratic values, norms, and this way how democracy moves forward in a society. Some scholars also argue that international support for democracy is very important. So local support and local demand is also required, and sometimes international support is also required. International support becomes more important when internal forces inside a country are weak. When democratic forces within the country are weak, then international support is more required. A supportive international environment also helps push countries toward democracy. When political systems in the Gulf states started to change, the role of the United States became very important. This chapter studies how the United States influenced the political process in the Gulf states. Political changes in the Gulf happens Political change in the Gulf happens slowly and gradually. So let me remind you again, in the Arab Gulf states, we have 6 states: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, and Oman. These are the 6 Arab Gulf states. The change takes place step by step. But at the same time, this change is supported by a variety of internal and external forces. American policymakers always mentioned that democracy in the Gulf must appear through local processes. American policymakers always mentioned that democracy in the Gulf must appear through local processes. If local forces are not involved or not interested, then the democracy cannot move forward. So the American policymakers were also convinced on this. They said local societies should shape their own political systems. Local societies should shape their own political systems. As external facilitators and supporters, they could only facilitate. They believe that democratic reforms work best when they come from national leaders and local institutions. Even then, American governments continued to support democratic reforms. The United States tried to support reforms that were already gaining acceptance in the region. The United States encouraged Gulf rulers to introduce democratic changes. The United States also pushed them to cooperate with various American agencies working in the region. Because of this, international pressure played a vital role in supporting democracy in the Gulf region. Many US activities in the region focused on providing alternative political ideas. These ideas often challenge the existing political systems. The ideas to challenge the existing political systems were there. To understand the political reforms happening today, the role of the United States government and American civil society organizations has to be considered. In the post 9/11 period, political change in the Gulf continued. Democratic changes made progress step by step. These changes became stronger with international support. Number one, 6.1, constitutional, judicial, and political developments. This is the response actually, response of the Arab states, governments, and societies. Important constitutional changes happened in the Gulf monarchies between 2000 and 2008. Bahrain took the lead. Bahrain introduced a new constitution in 2002. Qatar followed next. Qatar implemented its new constitution in 2003. There was one major difference between the two constitutions. Now here you see why I have started the discussion on the response with constitutions. In fact, constitution is the fundamental law of a country. Constitution is the fundamental law. It is the basic law to transition from minority rule or the authoritarian rule to the rule of law requires the fundamental law. So a fundamental law is called the Constitution. All other laws are made in the light of the fundamental law, that is the Constitution. If any other law contradicts the Constitution, that law will be nullified. That law will be eliminated. Okay? It will be rejected because it is not according to the Constitution, according to the fundamental law. So, having a Constitution is the first and foremost requirement for a democratic system. It can be taken as the first step. Formation of a constitution, implementation of a constitution can be taken as the first step towards democratic rule, towards rule of law. So when there was a lot of pressure and demand on the Arab Gulf states, so they had to pay attention to the constitutions. So Bahrain constituted and introduced a new constitution. Then Qatar also introduced a new constitution in 2003. There was one major difference between the two constitutions. We are on slide 30, slide number 30. There was one major difference between the two constitutions of Bahrain and Qatar. The Qatari constitution was approved by the people. A popular referendum was held in Qatar. In this referendum, 96% of Qatari voters agreed with the new constitution. 96% of the Qatari citizens voted in favor of the new constitution. Men and women both voted in this referendum in April 2003. So referendums are also democratic procedures, referendums. In referendums, people show their consent, their acceptance or rejection of something. So referendum is also sort of vote, sort of election. Men and women both voted in this referendum in April 2003. In Bahrain, the situation was different. Bahrain actually brought back the 1973 constitution. There was a constitution in Bahrain in 1973 which was not in action, so it was revived. That constitution was revived in 2002 in Bahrain. This return of the 1973 constitution basically meant a new constitution was introduced. So, in effect, it was a new constitution. Both Bahrain and Qatar made big steps toward changing their political systems. Both countries moved toward becoming constitutional monarchies. Constitutional monarchy. If there is a constitutional monarchy, it simply means it is a democracy. You know, in Europe, there are many constitutional monarchies, including the United Kingdom. It is a constitutional monarchy. It is a strong democracy. There are some others as well. I think in Portugal, in Spain, in Netherlands, still they have monarchs, but they are constitutional monarchs. The new Bahraini constitution banned physical torture. So physical torture is undemocratic. If it is banned, it is democratic. So in Bahrain, under the new constitution, the physical torture was banned. In Pakistan, if police resorts to physical torture, it is unconstitutional. It is undemocratic. And I think the Constitution of Pakistan does not allow this. Even then, it is in practice. So it is practiced illegally. This practice is illegal. If a policeman or policewoman while beats someone, they use violence, it is illegal. So physical torture was banned in Bahrain under the new constitution. Psychological torture, it is also unconstitutional and undemocratic. And all ill treatment of prisoners, ill treatment of prisoners, it is also not allowed. This helped people feel more respected. So even the criminals, the prisoners, they have respect. They have to be respected under a democratic setup and more dignified. Both Bahrain and Kuwait introduced the idea of separation of powers. So separation of powers, it is another characteristic of democratic rule, democratic governance. If one person has all the powers, it is not democracy. Separation of powers, separate legislature is required, separate executive, separate judiciary. It is called separation of powers. In Bahrain, legislative power is now given to a two-house legislative body. Two-house legislative body means bicameral parliament. Bicameral parliament. Pakistani parliament is also bicameral. We have one upper house and one lower house. Upper house is Senate and lower house is the National Assembly. So it is called bicameralism. Some of the parliaments have only one house. They are unicameral parliaments. This body has the Nawab Council, lower house. Nawab Council is the lower house in Bahrain, and the Shura Council, upper house. It is the upper house. The lower house is elected, like the members of the National Assembly. The upper house is appointed. In Pakistan, members of both upper and lower houses, they are elected. They are not appointed. Here in Bahrain, the members of the upper house, the Nawab Council, they are appointed by the king. Each house has 40 members. Members of the lower house are elected through universal adult voting. The Qatari constitution also divides powers among three branches. The Emir and his cabinet hold executive power. The Emir, who is the king, and his ministers, they form the executive branch of the government. The Shura Council holds legislative power. The Shura makes the laws. So, but because the Amir appoints the members of the upper house, so he has a lot of influence, lot of power, legislative power also, because the appointees are in his favor. So they will not make any law against which cuts his power. The courts hold judicial power. Kuwait also moved forward with separation of powers. For the first time in Kuwait's history, the Prime Minister and Crown Prince became two different people. So, until 9/11 in Kuwait, the Crown Prince was the Prime Minister. Always. The Crown Prince, it means the prince, usually son of the king, was the Prime Minister, and king himself would be the king. So, uh, overall, the whole power lied within the family. So now the prime minister had to be different than the crown prince in Kuwait. The prime minister is now answerable to the parliament. The prime minister can now face legal questioning. Legal questioning. So the parliament can ask questions to the prime minister after the amendments. These reforms support transparency. They support good governance. They help in building stronger institutions. So if a parliament can now ask questions to the prime minister, it means now it is stronger than before. The parliament has become stronger than before. In Bahrain, legislative elections had not been held for almost 30 years. The new constitution of Bahrain required elections to take place. So for last 30 years, there were no elections in Bahrain. But after 9/11, with the implementation of the new constitution, the elections were held. Qatar held its referendum in 2003. The Emir approved the constitution in June 2004. Qatar's new constitution created a 45-member parliament. It also introduced universal suffrage. Universal suffrage means universal enfranchisement, where all adults have the right to vote. It is called universal suffrage, universal enfranchisement. Qataris aged 18 and above were given the right to vote in May 2008. The Shura Council approved the election law in 2008. This law created secret and direct voting, secret balloting, direct balloting. The Qatari Shura Council can review the draft budget. Shura Council can review the draft budget. It can also amend the draft budget. Earlier, Qatar's Shura Council had only 35 members, and all of them were appointed. Before this, all of the members of the Shura Council in Qatar were appointed by the king. Now they are elected and they are 45. It means the Shura Council has become stronger. Now the council has 45 members, 30 members are elected, 15 members are appointed. If two-thirds of the Shura Council agree on a bill, it becomes law after the Amir approves it. So two-thirds majority is required for making a law. Simple majority cannot make a law. The council passes the budget. The council oversees government activities. The Shura Council can question ministers. The Shura Council can send ministers home by a vote of no confidence. No vote of no confidence, it has also got. Qatar's new constitution also protects people's rights and freedoms. The new constitution gives the right of assembly to the people, and it gives the right to form association. The new constitution ensures an independent judiciary. It ensures freedom of expression, and it ensures freedom of religious activities. No changes are allowed that reduce the freedoms given to the people. Number one, this constitution ensures freedoms and rights. Number two, no change can be made to the constitution which curtails these freedoms and rights. It is important. It is important. Those freedom and rights cannot be taken back. The Shura Council, the Parliament, the King, now they cannot undo these rights and freedoms. Some analysts say the new Qatari constitution is one of the most modern in the Arab world. The Emir of Qatar created the Supreme Constitutional Court as another reform step. Supreme Constitutional Court. Okay, so constitutional courts are formed in many countries. In fact, the Supreme Court, it is also a constitutional court because it is established under the Constitution. But in some countries, Supreme Court is separate and the Constitutional Court is separate. Like Pakistan, now we have both. We have one Supreme Court, the other the Constitutional Court. So in this case, the Constitutional Court is focused to defend the Constitution or to litigate the matters which are directly related to the Constitution. And the Supreme Court will deal with other matters. Saudi Arabia also saw reforms in February 2009. The Economist reported that the reform could allow the council to choose King Abdullah's successor. So there was a possibility that the new king would be elected. Although it did not happen, but there were some expectations at that time. This could become the first semi-democratic transfer of power in Saudi history, even if it were limited to princes. Princes, even they would allow an election for a king, the people would not vote. The princes would vote for the king. This is what happens in the UAE. Do you know this? The president of the United Arab Emirates is elected. And you know who votes? Anybody knows? 7 emirs of the 7 states of the UAE, they vote. So through 7 votes, the president is elected of the UAE. Only 7 votes. Because in the United Arab Emirates, you have 7 states. Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, Ras Al Khaimah, Fujairah, I think, one, like this. So they have 7 states. 7 states have their own one Amir. And all those Amirs, those 7 sheikhs, they elect their president. So this type of expectation was there regarding Saudi Arabia, although it did not take place. King Abdullah replaced conservative judges in Saudi courts. King Abdullah replaced these conservative judges with reform-minded judges. Reform-minded judges were put in the courts. He also replaced the conservative head of the judiciary. In February 2009, King Abdullah removed the head of the Supreme Judicial Council, Sheikh Saleh Lohayatan. He also removed a number of other senior judges. Sheikh Lohayatan was known for giving very harsh rulings. He would give very harsh rulings. One ruling said it was legal to kill owners of TV channels showing immorality. It was one of the rulings given by Sheikh Lohayatan. He was a judge. So King Abdullah removed him. According to a 2008 annual report on civil society and democratization in the Arab world, Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy. So there is an institute in Egypt. This institute prepares this annual report on civil society and democratization. Bahrain and Qatar are constitutional monarchies. No, Bahrain and Qatar are constitutional monarchies. So there is some check on the monarchs. Kuwait is a constitutional hereditary emirate. Constitutional hereditary emirate, according to those reports. Kuwait was included in the Community of Democracies Forum. After 9/11, large reforms and political changes took place in the Gulf countries. The momentum of reforms continued. Parliamentary politics moved forward. Political systems became more open. Political pluralism increased. After 9/11, the Gulf region experienced a historic rise in electoral politics. The Gulf region experienced a historic rise in electoral politics. This happened because of the constitutional developments taking place. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Oman held their first ever elections after the US announced its policy of promoting democracy in the Middle East. So, first ever elections in these four countries in the Gulf region were held. First ever elections, ever, after 9/11, when America put pressure on these countries. So, before 9/11, there were no elections at all in these four countries: Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, and Oman. So it was the response, one of the response. Qatar held its first parliamentary polls in 2007. Parliamentary polls. So in Qatar, there were some sort of elections, but not for parliament. So parliamentary elections in Qatar were first ever held after 9/11. The next point is education and economic sectors. So far, we have discussed the constitutions and parliaments. Now, education and economic sectors. Fatah. Fatah is a scholar. He says that the education sector is an important area when we think or talk about democracy in any part of the world. So, educational reforms are also required for promotion of democracy. Fatah says highly educated people can easily learn how democracy works in other countries. So, an educated person can better understand the functioning of democracy. He says their cost of getting information is low. So, an educated person can conveniently get the required information as compared to an illiterate person. Because of this, such people show more support for democracy. So Fatah says educated people usually, generally, provide more support to democracy. The ruling regimes in the Gulf Cooperation Council countries introduced reforms also in the education sector. In Saudi Arabia, the religious elite lost its exclusive control over girls' education in March 2002. So, until March 2002, the religious people in Saudi Arabia, they had exclusive control over education of girls. English was added as a subject at earlier school grades. So before that, English was not taught at the uh, earlier grades in the primary classes. The king replaced conservative officials in the education ministry with modern and dynamic officials. In the United Arab Emirates, the Ministry of Education introduced a plan in 2002 to monitor education reforms. Ministry of Education in the United Arab Emirates introduced a plan in 2002 to monitor education reforms. The ministry formed local committees. These committees were told to check school textbooks. They were asked to remove any content that contained offensive or discriminatory language. So, offense and discrimination is undemocratic. Zakaria, Free Zakaria, you know Free Zakaria? Free Zakaria is a scholar and he is also an anchor person on CNN. He has published many books. He's a good scholar. Free Zakaria, in his book, one of his books is The Future of Freedom. The Future of Freedom. In this book, Zakaria talks about the importance of a free economy for building and strengthening liberal democracy. So, economic reforms are also required for promotion of democracy. Zakaria says that a true entrepreneurial business class can become the most important force for change in the Middle East. He argues, Zakaria argues that economic reforms must come first because they are basic and essential. Sayyid Waldabah from Asharq al-Awsat. Asharq al-Awsat is a newspaper. Sayyid Waldabah is associated with this newspaper. He explains that there is now a new energy among the people of the region. After 9/11, when Americans supported democracy in these countries, this journalist observed that there is now a new energy among the people in the Arab countries. He says the rise of the middle class has created a vibrant private sector. The middle class has risen and private sector has become more vibrant. He says this private sector has helped push people toward demanding reforms. You know, in these countries, historically, economy, the economies have been in the control of the kings and princes and princesses. All major business companies have been owned either by kings or by the princes or the princesses, major companies. Still, if you study the economy of these countries where still there are kings, all major companies are owned by the members of the ruling family. So it means the private sector is weak. Private sectors is weak. But after 9/11, when there was a lot of pressure and demand, some reforms were made and private sector became somewhat vibrant. Oman and Bahrain signed free trade agreements with the United States, FTAs. Kuwait signed a trade and investment framework agreement, TIFA, with the United States in 2005. The United Arab Emirates made a TIFA Plus arrangement with the United States in 2007. Bahrain allowed labor unions for the first time. No, the labor unions for the rights of labor are important. On these platforms, they can raise their voice. Individual laborers cannot raise their voices. They cannot make powerful demands. But when they have their unions, they have their leaders, and they can lead them, and they can put some pressure on the ruling authorities. So Bahrain allowed labor unions for the first time after signing the FTA with the United States. So this is how the United States put pressure for economic liberalism, economic freedom in these countries, so that people get economic rights. The laborers get their rights in the factory offices. The private sector in the Gulf has now grown strongly. It has reached a level where it openly highlights demands for reform in the region. So when common people, common citizens who are not member of the ruling family, they become powerful, they become economically powerful, stronger, then they are expected to raise voice for political reform. If common people are economically weak, they usually are afraid of the authority of the rulers, and they are not able to demand their political rights. So that is why civil society and private sector, a strong civil society and a strong private sector is a precondition. It is a requirement for strengthening democracy, for promoting democracy in a country. 6.3, Civil Society, Media, and Freedom of Expression. Gulf monarchies loosened their control over civil society. So until 9/11, the monarchs and their families, they had strong grip over the civil society. Civil society is usually the human rights activists, the NGOs, and the NGOs which work for rights of the people, for development. So they ask the governments to make reforms, to uphold rights of the people. So under authority and the authoritarian governments, they usually dislike civil society. They dislike NGOs because they talk about reforms. So until 9/11, civil society was almost non-existent in the Arab world, particularly in these 6 Arab Gulf states. So Gulf monarchies loosened their control over civil society after 9/11. In Kuwait, in May 2006, the Constitutional Court cancelled 15 sections of the 1979 law on public gatherings. So there were restrictions on public gatherings. The people could not gather publicly. They could not have political gatherings or political rallies. So in May 2006, the Constitutional Court of Kuwait, it cancelled 15 sections of the 1979 law on public gatherings. In Bahrain, in May 2006, the parliament amended the 1973 public gatherings law. The ban on rallies near sensitive places was removed. Before that, the rallies were not allowed near sensitive places. And the all the places where kings and princes live can be taken as sensitive places. People could hold rallies near hospitals and airports. Now they were allowed. Workers were also allowed to form unions in 2002. They could form unions without getting government permission. So workers could not form unions before 2002. Just imagine. In Qatar, in May 2004, the government replaced the 1998 law with a new law. This new law allowed people to form professional associations. Professional associations. Here in Pakistan, clerks have their associations, engineers have their associations, pilots have their associations, ladies have their associations. There are many associations. And in democratic countries, there are more associations. So here, this new law allowed people to form professional associations. It means before that, they were not allowed to form professional associations. Qatar also allowed workers to form independent unions in 2004. Workers were allowed to negotiate with employers. They could discuss working hours, they could discuss working conditions and wages. So before that, workers were not allowed to negotiate. They just had to accept all the conditions already prepared by the employer. Now, after the reforms, the workers could negotiate their working hours, their wage, their salary, and their working conditions. So it means the workers got more rights. If no agreement was reached, workers were allowed to go on strike. So until then, they did not have the right to strike. Now they are allowed to strike. Growth of civil society organizations. I am on slide 142. Growth of civil society organizations. In 2002, Bahrain allowed human rights groups to take part in political activities. In the same year, Bahrain saw the creation of 65 new associations. In 2002, 65 new associations were formed in Bahrain. These included 11 political associations and 13 professional associations, like teachers associations, doctors associations, engineers associations. Until 2004, the number of civil society organizations in Bahrain had crossed 300. The number of civil society organizations in Bahrain had crossed 300 until 2004. Kuwait by 2006 had 55 different societies. These societies worked on religious issues, gender reform, political liberalization, and economic liberalization. About 40,000 people were members of these societies. In the UAE, civil society became more visible after 2000. Kuwait approved its first human rights association in 2004. First human rights association was formed in 2004 in Kuwait. Calls for reform from civil society. In March 2003, 6 political associations in Bahrain issued a declaration. They demanded more reforms. They asked for expansion of political rights. They also asked for expansion of individual freedoms. They also emphasized the need to empower women. They also called for ending corruption, media reforms, and new developments. Media and freedom of expression saw some positive changes. Oman created the Gulf Press Freedom Organization. Gulf Press Freedom Organization was created in Oman. Its aims were to support freedom of expression, to improve human rights conditions, and to provide professional help to media workers in the Gulf and Yemen. Saudi Arabia licensed the Saudi Journalists Association in 2003. It was formally established in 2004. The association had a 9-member board and a chairman. All members were elected by Saudi journalists. So, rights of the media persons, rights of journalists, freedom of media persons, it is also required for a democracy, for a democratic culture, because media monitors, media monitors, and it checks the misuse or abuse of power of the ruling elites. So, a vibrant media and independent media, it is also called the fourth pillar of the state. Three pillars, they are in the constitution, they are already discussed, they have already been discussed. Media, it is called the fourth pillar because it puts its checks. 300 journalists voted in the first election in 2004. Emergence of private TV channels. Gulf governments also allowed private TV channels. Before this, most media was state run. Most media was state run. You know, there was a time in Pakistan, there was only one TV channel, and it was PTV, Pakistan Television, and it is owned by the state. It is owned by the state. And there was only one radio channel, radio station, Radio Pakistan. It is again state radio. So now in Pakistan you have hundreds of radio and TV stations, and they are in private sector. So you have a vibrant media in Pakistan. So in this Gulf region, until 9/11, most media was state-run, owned by the state and run by the state. In Kuwait, in 2003, the government allowed its first private satellite TV channel. First private TV channel was allowed in 2003 in Kuwait. The channel was located in Dubai Media City. By early 2005, Kuwait had two operating satellite channels. Al Ikhbariya was established in Kuwait in January 2004. It is a TV channel. The UAE licensed Al Arabia in 2003. Al Arabia is a TV channel. Al Arabia became known for independent and liberal coverage. A few weeks back, I saw a program on YouTube on Al Arabia. In that program, Shah San also appeared on Al Arabia. In Qatar, Al Jazeera set up a media training and development center in 2004. So Al Jazeera was also set up after 9/11. Media got freedom. Al Jazeera English began in November 2006. So Al Jazeera Arabic in 2004 and Al Jazeera English in 2006. When a Saudi female newscaster read the first bulletin on Al Ikhbariya, it became news itself. What was the news? A woman in Saudi Arabia broadcast the news. It was a news. Until then, a woman could not read news on a TV. This was considered unusual in Kuwait also. Al Ikhbariya was in Kuwait or Saudi Arabia? Anyhow, it is Al Ikhbariya. I think it is in Kuwait. Legal reforms for media freedom. Bahrain took many legal steps to strengthen media and freedom of expression. In 2002, Bahrain introduced new press laws. These laws said publications cannot be shut down without good reason. So the government now cannot arbitrarily shut down the newspapers or magazines. There had to be some sufficient reason to close them. In May 2007, the Upper House Shura Council passed a draft law. This draft law aimed to remove criminal penalties for journalistic offenses. In May 2008, the Council ended imprisonment of journalists. It stated that editors cannot be sued for articles they did not write. It means before that, an editor could be punished for publishing an article which was written by someone else. So here we come to the end of today's discussion. The remaining points are there in my dissertation, my thesis. After your exams, if you find time and if you feel interested, you can read it further. So today is our last class of this semester of this course. So wish you good luck